I address you today not to criticize you, but to refer to you as a community of skeptics. Community of skeptics is not a bad thing. A community of skeptics is a powerful tool. Having a community of people who are questioning things that are being said by people who are in authority, by people who have a lot of information and who are trusted, is still a valuable asset. But I urge you to do it with everyone and not just people who are your favorites. And what I mean by this is when we look at the recent Echo Fox controversy with the Riot Games and the team owners, and we look at the reports that have come out about it, I want you to not just address your skepticism towards one of Riot Games, the team owner coalition that we haven't really put names to face or faces to, or Rick Fox and Echo Fox. I urge you to address your skepticism at all of them indiscriminately when we talk about this. Also at the reports and the reporters. A lot of you might be surprised to hear, given how much I have publicly supported Jacob Wolf in terms of his reporting and how much I pretty much don't question his knowledge and sources anymore, that I am okay with people questioning him and being skeptical of him. For example, there was the case last year when he felt pressured to make a spreadsheet of the reports that he's done, and the reports that were accurate, the reports that were partially accurate, and the reports that were incorrect. And he made this spreadsheet to show that actually his rate of success is really, really high, but he was only motivated to really do this because people were calling him into question. And I think the fact that he's holding himself accountable and the community is holding him accountable is really important because he has a huge responsibility. People have said things like, well, we throw Jacob Wolf under the bus for the Rocks Tigers, but why Renekton Y gets something wrong, and maybe he was just off. Jacob Wolf should be held more accountable than why Renekton Y. Why Renekton Y has no face. He appears every once in a while. He says some bullshit. People are using his name. So, of course, Jacob Wolf should be held more accountable. He's on a publication, he has a face, he has a name, and people have learned to trust him. He has a lot of trust that he has earned, and he has grown, and people should be able to trust him. So being skeptical of him every once in a while is not something I'm against. I think flaming him openly and for a very long time and blaming him for the Rocks Tigers disbanding, etc., might be going too far, but I think being skeptical of Jacob Wolf is something that I invite. Being skeptical of journalists in general is something that I invite. Being skeptical of public figures, being skeptical of me, because I'm sure even though I don't report on things, even though I'm not necessarily what you would call a standard journalist, I still make opinions, I still make strong statements that I encourage people to challenge if they seem wrong. Basically, I want a community of skeptics who decide on things for themselves, who make their own opinions. And this is incredibly important, okay, when something like this happens, when something like the Echo Fox team owner Riot Games controversy starts. So to give a brief outline, since I think a lot of people have kept up with it, if you're watching this video, first there was a report by Slingshot Esports' Vince Nairn that owners had given Riot a letter basically pressuring for franchising and more revenue sharing. And I think the revenue sharing bit is the really, really important part. Just having some way to retain loyalty or keep the money that they're earning, some way to tap into broadcast earnings, some way to tap into the incidental costs that Riot recoup from marketing the teams and that they get from selling skins related to teams or skins related to players, icons, etc., World Championship stuff. All of that stuff is fine. I think that's the big issue that we're getting at, is that the teams feel like they're not getting back from Riot what they're putting in right now. And so that was the big concern that motivated the letter overall. The second report that came out was from Esports Observer's Ferguson Mitchell, okay? And this one said that the NALCS teams felt pressured to sign the player agreement, the annual player agreement that they have to sign, because one team, Echo Fox, chose not to. And because of that, that team was being encouraged by Riot to poach players, and in fact, they had already started approaching and poaching at least one player. which they normally wouldn't be allowed to do, but since the other teams hadn't yet signed the player agreement, their players were free agents and they were open to being snatched up, etc., etc. So all the teams felt pressured to sign and went ahead and signed. The third, okay, the third report that came out revealed that specifically Equifax had attempted to approach Adrian from P1, Phoenix 1, shortly after he'd been signed by them. There's not necessarily any specification on whether or not this was after or before the player agreement controversy, whether or not this was after or before the other teams signed the player agreement. So this report was from The Score by Jeff Frazier and Gabriel Zoltan Johann. Okay, so all of these reports came out, 3 different publications, 3 different authors, well 4, because The Score had 2 on the byline. When the immediate reaction to the third report is we need more information, I take a step back, and I agree, because I think that should be a reaction. Your reaction should be, I want to know more about this. It should be, I want to think about this more, I want more sides, but in esports, especially League of Legends esports, we don't really get all of the sides. Equifax made a very, very short statement about how they live by the Riot rules and they wouldn't poach a player right if it were against the rules, which makes you question, okay, was it inside the period in which the other teams hadn't signed yet, etc., etc., but we don't know is really the reality of the situation, and they said they will give no other statement on the matter, so we're not going to get Equifax's full side. We're not going to get more details than this. Probably the other teams themselves aren't going to come forward and make a public statement because they can't single themselves out, and that's why they're using reporters. A lot of people don't realize that when you talk about sources, okay, a lot of sources and articles can be the teams themselves, can be the players themselves, but they don't want to reveal that, or they can't do that with their own platform, so they use journalists as a tool to make that information available, to kind of thing, because, and I'm not saying that that's true in this case, but I'm saying that it's very likely that the team owners themselves can't make a statement on this, right? They can't go to the public and single themselves out, so maybe someone close to the team or the teams themselves may have leaked this information, so we may be already getting their side. Then Riot Games, notoriously very, very difficult to get a full picture from, right? They're not going to release everything that they have because, again, they might have their own sources that they want to protect. So this isn't necessarily a blanket criticism of the way that Riot's PRs operate. It's just a reality that we don't often get a full side of the story. But we do have a lot of information provided by 3 different publications, right? 3 different publications, 4 different authors. It's unlikely that they all have the same 1 or 2 sources. I mean, it's possible, actually. So that's something that we need to keep in the back of our minds, right? We need to think about the possibility that all the sources are the same. They're using different publications to make it seem like they aren't the same source, but it's likely that they're using different sources, because there are a lot of people who seem to have this information in general. So immediately, we're already starting to assess this. And if we do get new information, that's great, okay? More information is always good. It will help us make decisions, and we can't just stick to our old decisions if we're presented new information that makes it seem like these decisions are wrong. But we can already start to make judgments. We can already start to call into question some of this, and people start to call into question the authenticity of these reports. I only personally know 2 of the people that made these reports, so I can't speak on personal contacts that much, but these guys don't have the same reputations as like a Jacob Wolf, but they're a bunch of different people saying similar things, right? And so in a way they're fact-checking each other. So we question the information we've given. So far, I don't see a really, really glaring reason to say this information is wrong. I agree it would be great if we had more sides to the story, but right now we're being somewhat skeptical of the information, but we're kind of accepting that a lot of different people are saying the same thing. The story as we have it now, we can start to criticize or make judgments of some of the people involved. And immediately I know that because I think a lot of people in this community value the mainstream side, because we get articles by mainstream sports writers upvoted to the front when they basically have nothing to do with esports, right? They're just explaining to a casual audience what esports is, right? So it's not information we don't already know, but there's a lot of validation given to mainstream publications, a lot of validation given to mainstream people. When Rick Fox, okay, got into esports, this was really cool, right? This seemed really cool because it was a big Lakers player who came in and he decided he wanted to invest in esports and call it like a real sport to talk about the other players like athletes. He's made it a platform for himself, so people want to like Rick Fox. They want to like Echo Fox. They want to trust Echo Fox, right? They also want to trust Riot Games because we love League of Legends. We want to believe that Riot Games wouldn't try to screw teams over for no reason. We want to believe that they want what's best for their player base, for their viewing audience. But you also trust the other teams. We can't necessarily put names or faces to them. Right now, the only other one we can actually put a name or face to, maybe Cloud9 for being involved, but they're not directly involved in this poaching controversy, and P1. The reality is that when we talk about the team coalition that Rick Fox refused to join and that people criticize him for refusing to join, includes all of your other favorites. It includes Team Solo Mid. It includes Counter Logic Gaming, okay? It includes Cloud9. Because they all refused, if we believe the report, to sign the player agreement until there was pressure from Rick Fox. So you also love these teams and you want to trust them. I know you do. So it's hard to be skeptical of all of these people you want to trust, but you need to start thinking about that a little bit, or I do, or someone does, okay? And you can't just play favorites. You can't just pick your favorites and not listen to every side and not think about every possibility. Now we get to the real core of why I felt the need to make this video. This very common sentiment that I see, other than we need more information, is, oh, this isn't really about the poaching, this isn't really about Adrian, this is just an excuse so that the other teams won't scrim Echo Fox. And that was a key part of the third report, is that the other teams have decided to exclude Echo Fox from scrims based on this information, based on this poaching. And the response was that they just need an excuse to exclude Echo Fox because they wouldn't join the team's coalition. Their little coalition is a phrase that I've been used a lot. But what are the implications of this coalition? Riot Games, in the initial letter, made the broad statement that Riot is not sure the current NA teams are desirable long-term partners. This is a broad blanket statement. It doesn't single any team out. We assume they're not talking about TSM. We assume they're not talking about teams that we like, the teams that have been in the scene forever, that have helped Riot build their brand. But we don't know that. Also, some of the newer teams that are getting in the scene, teams like Immortals with VC branding, we don't know if they're valuable partners or not. Riot doesn't know if they're valuable partners or not. Do we assume Riot is talking about them? Do we assume Riot is talking about the lower level teams that don't do well in the league? Or are they talking about a wide spectrum of things? It's really hard to decide when they use blanket statements, because all they're saying right there is, we unilaterally, okay, get to decide which teams are valuable partners, okay? We get to pick who we want to work with. You have no say in the matter. So the only power, all right, that the team owners have against Riot Games, who are the organizers of the league, the controllers of the game, the controllers of intellectual property in the game, the partial owners of player contracts because they pay part of the salary, etc., etc., all of these guys have so much power to decide whether or not your business actually exists. So the only power that these teams have is their little coalition. And that's something that you need to be aware of when you criticize them for wanting to exclude EFX because they wouldn't join the little coalition, because they're effectively, like, Rick Fox doesn't know if Riot considers him a desirable team partner or not. He thinks maybe signing this agreement will make him look better, right? He thinks maybe going along with these rules will make him a better team owner partner. But there's no guarantee of that either. So the fact that he didn't sign the agreement and the other teams did, that creates a big divide instantly. Because it's like, what if immediately Riot is more favorable to him because he was willing to buckle and sign this contract, and now Riot doesn't consider the other teams desirable team partners? What if that is a big criterion determining how Riot is going to deal with them going forward, right? So it's a big deal. It's actually a huge deal that he wouldn't join the coalition. I'm not saying that he should have. I'm not saying that because he didn't, we should consider him a pariah and we should not cheer for Echo Fox and all the other stuff. But I'm saying that this is the only way that the team owners could think of to get power, right? Was to create this sort of coalition, and now it hasn't worked out. And so that's a reason to be mad. That's not some petty disagreement. That's not something that doesn't necessarily have far-reaching consequences, given the way that Riot Games have chosen to phrase, given the fact that they haven't cut anyone into revenue sharing yet, right? You have no actual stability in this business if Riot is indiscriminately saying, we're not sure if we trust you, or you TSM, or you CLG, or you Phoenix One. It's hard. That's really difficult. So that's why I'm making this video. I think that we should be a little bit more skeptical of our gut reactions and think about why things like this coalition might be important. On Rick Fox's side, because I do not necessarily want to make this just like this condemning thing for Echo Fox. He did see an opportunity to perhaps get in Riot's good graces, to go along, where he could potentially be advantageous, and I don't think that's something that people wouldn't take, right? Maybe he actually really trusts Riot Games to, in the long run, cash in on these promises, and that if they agreed to sign the partnership and they were willing and cooperative, that Riot would deem them all good partners, and so he did what he felt was best for him. So I'm not condemning him, but I am saying the fact that if he didn't join the other team's coalition, that's a big deal. And I also think that if you're setting up this situation for unilateral agreement just based on Riot deciding everything, you're going to be in trouble, and you're basically already conceding whatever power that you have just by letting Riot dictate the timeline, dictate other things without giving you reasons other than you're not necessarily desirable team partners. So that's all I have to say on this, and thank you, and continue being skeptical. Please tell me why I'm wrong. Thank you.